In the vast theater of the world's oceans, power is not measured solely by the number of ships, nor by the size of fleets. It is measured by reach, resilience, and readiness. And over the course of the 20th century, one naval force rose from modest beginnings to become the most dominant maritime power the world has ever known: the United States Navy. But this transformation did not happen overnight, nor was it guaranteed. In fact, at the dawn of the 20th century, the U.S. Navy was still finding its identity, while European empires like Britain, Germany, and France ruled the seas with centuries of naval tradition behind them. So how did the United States Navy, once considered a regional force, come to outperform the world's most established naval powers? Was it superior technology, smarter strategy, or something deeper, an industrial and logistical foundation that no other nation could match? In this documentary, we'll trace the evolution of the U.S. Navy from its early 20th century posture to its decisive role in World War II and beyond. We'll compare its approach to that of other great navies, British, Japanese, German, and examine the critical decisions, innovations, and doctrines that set it apart. Because the story of the U.S. Navy is not just about ships and sailors. It's about how a nation harnessed its industrial might, strategic foresight, and democratic values to command the seas, and, in doing so, shaped the course of modern history.
At the turn of the 20th century, the dominant naval power was clear: the British Royal Navy. With a global empire to protect, Britain maintained a fleet that dwarfed all others. Its doctrine was simple: command the seas and you command the world. Germany, too, was rising. Under Kaiser Wilhelm II, the German Empire launched a naval arms race, building massive dreadnoughts to challenge British supremacy. France and Russia maintained sizable fleets, but their naval strategies were often reactive, shaped by continental concerns. And then there was the United States. Still recovering from the Civil War and focused inward, the U.S. Navy in 1900 was modest in size and ambition, but change was coming. The Spanish-American War of 1898 had revealed something important: the United States could project power overseas. The victory at Manila Bay, led by Commodore George Dewey, was a wake-up call, not just to the world, but to America itself. President Theodore Roosevelt, a former Assistant Secretary of the Navy, understood the importance of sea power. Inspired by Alfred Thayer Mahan's influential work, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, Roosevelt began to reshape the Navy, not just as a defensive force, but as a global instrument of American policy. The Great White Fleet, which circumnavigated the globe from 1907 to 1909, was more than a show of strength. It was a declaration. The United States was no longer a regional power. It was stepping onto the world stage. While European navies focused on battleship counts and colonial stations, the U.S. Navy quietly built something more enduring: an industrial base. American shipyards, powered by a growing economy and abundant natural resources, could produce warships faster and more efficiently than any other nation. More importantly, the U.S. developed a logistical infrastructure, fuel depots, dry docks, and supply chains that allowed its Navy to operate far from home for extended periods. This was a key difference. The Royal Navy, though vast, was stretched thin across a global empire. Germany's fleet was powerful but bottled up in the North Sea. Japan's navy was formidable in the Pacific, but dependent on limited resources. The U.S. Navy, by contrast, was supported by a continent-sized industrial engine. When war came, that engine would prove decisive.
No event tested the world's navies like World War II, and no navy adapted more rapidly or more effectively than the United States Navy. The attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 was a devastating blow.
8 battleships were damaged or sunk. For many nations, such a loss would have been crippling. But the U.S. Navy responded not with retreat, but with reinvention. American naval doctrine shifted from battleship-centric warfare to carrier-based operations. The Battle of Midway in 1942, where 4 Japanese carriers were sunk, marked a turning point, not just in the Pacific War, but in naval history itself. While Japan had entered the war with superior carrier tactics, the U.S. quickly caught up and then surpassed them. American carriers were larger, faster to repair, and supported by a vast network of logistics and intelligence. Submarines, too, played a critical role. While German U-boats terrorized the Atlantic, American submarines crippled Japan's merchant fleet, cutting off vital supplies and hastening the end of the war in the Pacific. By 1945, the U.S. Navy had grown into the largest and most powerful maritime force in history. It had built over 6,000 ships, including more than 100 aircraft carriers. No other nation came close. Unlike previous great powers, the United States did not demobilize its Navy after victory. Instead, it maintained a permanent global presence. The Cold War demanded it. With the Soviet Union emerging as a rival superpower, the U.S. Navy became a key instrument of deterrence and diplomacy. Nuclear-powered submarines, capable of launching ballistic missiles from anywhere in the world, gave the U.S. second strike capability. Aircraft carrier strike groups became floating air bases, projecting power without the need for foreign soil. Meanwhile, the Soviet Navy focused on coastal defense and submarine warfare. It never achieved the global reach of the U.S. fleet. The British Royal Navy, once the pride of empire, gradually downsized. France and other NATO allies maintained capable fleets, but none could match the scale, technology, or operational tempo of the U.S. Navy. By the 1980s, under President Ronald Reagan's 600-ship Navy initiative, American naval dominance was reaffirmed. And even after the Cold War ended, the Navy remained central to U.S. strategy, from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea.
So what explains this enduring superiority? It wasn't just shipbuilding. It was doctrine, flexibility, innovation, and above all, logistics. The U.S. Navy learned to fight not just battles, but campaigns. It built systems to sustain operations across months and oceans. It invested in training, in carrier aviation, in undersea warfare, and in command and control systems that allowed for real-time coordination across the globe. Other navies had brilliant admirals, brave sailors, and advanced ships, but none combined all the elements, industrial, strategic, technological, and human, into a single cohesive force the way the U.S. Navy did. And behind it all was a nation willing to invest, not just in weapons, but in the infrastructure and institutions that made sustained naval power possible.
Today, the U.S. Navy sails not just as a symbol of American might, but as a legacy of over a century of learning, adaptation, and resolve. From the quiet shipyards of the early 1900s to the vast carrier groups of the 21st century, the journey has been shaped by visionaries, engineers, sailors, and strategists who understood that sea power is not a luxury, it is a necessity. In outperforming other naval powers, the U.S. Navy did more than win wars. It preserved peace, protected commerce, and ensured that the oceans remained open for all. And as we look to the future of new technologies, new threats, and new challenges, we are reminded that the lessons of the past still matter. Because in the end, sea power is not just about ships, it's about purpose. And the United States Navy has never lost sight of its purpose.